Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another part of our Meet a Professional series. Today, I'm here with the amazing Dr. Avi Rosenbaum, who has made the time to speak with all of us today. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Rosenbaum so that he can tell us a little bit about himself and how he discovered his passion and career while at YU. I would ask that if you do have questions, please put them in the chat. And as we go through the dialogue today, if there's room for them to be asked during the talk, then we'll integrate those. If not, then at the end, we'll leave an open floor for Q&A. So Dr. Rosenbaum, please take it away and tell us all about yourself and your career path.
Sure. Thank you very much, Matt. Pleasure to meet with the students and reconnect with the alumni at Yeshiva. Also pleasure to see Rabbi Daniel Coleman on the line as well. So pleasure to reconnect with him. We've known each other for almost 20 years, but hopefully we connected more recently. Hello.
Thanks for the shout outs. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Good to see you.
Likewise.
A bit of background about myself. New York City, born and bred, went to Yeshiva University High School, then went to Yeshiva University for an undergraduate in biology. And following that, stayed on campus for another year and a half in the rabbinical program, where, that's part of where I connected with Rabbi Coleman. Didn't finish that program because I was drawn away to a PhD program at Harvard University, where I did a PhD in genetics, focusing on the tools for understanding the human genome and for analyzing it at Harvard University in George Church's lab. And subsequently had an interesting career path. So it was maybe a more typical career path from Yeshiva College directly into graduate school. But after graduate school, only about, I think it's 30, maybe even less than that, go from a PhD in the hard sciences into an academic career afterwards. So really many avenues are open, and I was exploring many of those avenues at that time as a graduate student. I ended up going to a very promising startup called Ion Torrent Systems. Some of the machines that I helped build at that company are a screenshot behind me. Those are not actual machines, but those are machines that I helped build about 10 years ago. From there, in 2017, looking for a second career transition. And I found myself while working at Ion Torrent Systems, or at that time, part of the multinational Thermo Fisher Scientific, a company that enables science to be done, a 65,000 person company. I found myself having moved away from the bench. I was no longer actively building machines. I was directing people to build machines, and found myself more in a strategic role for how best to approach a variety of problems when you have a team working for you. That led me to consider more and more options in the strategic side. Do I want to be leading my own team? Do I want to be interacting with other people, developing their own technologies? And part of that brainstorming led me to strengthen connection with Tectonic Capital, which is a venture capital firm in New York City, who's one of the founding partners I had known since I was in graduate school. And they were looking to expand into part of the hard sciences that I was most familiar with. In 2017, they were looking to start investing in CRISPR, which obviously just made even more of a headline this past month with the Nobel Prize being awarded to Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna. And they wanted to invest in that space 3 years ago. So I joined them to help develop thesis coming from my scientific and strategic mindset, combined with their financial mindset, to see how we can tackle the problem and learn together. So that was 2017. Since then, I've been integrating in the New York City bio economy or the bio community, lots of startups here currently. And now I find myself working not just with Tectonic Capital, but with a hedge fund up in Boston, enabled by this new virtual economy that we have, a virtual environment where it would not have been practical to fly in every once in a while to Boston, but now this online, I can work with somebody who I've actually never met with in person. So I'm working closely with the hedge fund in Boston, with another 2 venture capital groups as well to explore how they can best make investment. And I've also gotten back more to my roots, and I am actively advising a number of startup companies again, in that case, sometimes in New York and sometimes not in New York with this virtual environment that we're in, and helping them explore how best to develop their products with my understanding how I help to develop products at iTorrent, as well as my understanding as how some of these startups are actively financed and what the people providing that finance are looking for in terms of current capabilities and future capabilities and milestones that these companies should be pursuing as they progress and develop their products.
Terrific, sir. Thank you very much for sharing, and to kind of go into that more and learn a little bit about your multifaceted experience and background across different roles and capacities served. This is a two-part question. So what would you say informed your career path at any point in time or even in retrospect? And the second part to that is, what might students do to inform their own path in making their career in your industry and field?
Absolutely. My industry, if it's taken as either a consultant or as a member of the venture capital community, both have a really amorphous and wide set of skills that one can be used. So consultant is just leveraging whatever your expertise is, and additionally acting as an outsider to the company to have a more objective perspective on the problems that might be facing them. So coming with your unique skill set where you haven't been in the trenches of that company and can take a step back and say, okay, does this make sense? Can really be invaluable to a company. And a lot of it just resolves around probing questions and that ability to step back. The venture capital community is unique in that it's a melting pot of so many different talents that are required because you can really focus on any subsection of the industry to say, what do I understand about that industry? How do I know enough about it to make that educated guess? And how do I know enough about it while making that educated guess to then speak and act as a bridge between the people financing the venture capital firm and the people receiving the financing from the venture capital firm? So you really have two different customers at every given time. You have your limited partners who entrusted you with large amounts of capital to spend, and then you have the startups who you are actively supporting to make best use of those funds. So it requires a huge amount of skill sets, and depending upon the firm one finds themselves in, some firms are large enough where there's one person dedicated to only interacting with the limited partners, only dealing with the people receiving the money and making sure they understand the value being provided by their money managers in the venture capital firm, and they keep that funnel going. While the other people that are just doing the due diligence with the startups, some people bridge the entire capacity, and others are the step after the due diligence, actively working with these startups to make sure they reach their full capabilities. So really, it's a diverse set of skills, and any set of skills can be of value in any of these capacities, as long as you bring a healthy sense of curiosity, a willingness to work with other people, and because at the end of the day, a lot of it is an interpersonal skill set where nobody's locked in a room, everybody's assessing how an individual is performing and how best to help, let's say, that founder get over this rut, because something's bound to go wrong at one time during the process, and how can you provide the greatest assistance to make the company as successful as possible.
Terrific, terrific. So I would imagine that takes not only expertise, but some skills. And for this next question, I'd like to know what technical skills and soft skills are crucial for being a competitive candidate for entry-level roles in your field, whatever those entry-level roles may be now, considering our current circumstances.
Mm-hmm. We have looked at, in my firm, a number of people with advanced degrees. So we look at people either starting an MBA or finishing an MBA to provide that crucial set of skills for understanding the entire environment and understanding lots of different tasks and lots of different aspects that go into making a successful company. However, that is by no means tried and true. Venture capital is unique in that there are so many different angles to it that there is no defined pathway to get there. Some people working in a venture capital firm will be people who had a 40-year track record and now 70 and have money to spend and have a vast set of experience to leverage and a network, which is of utmost importance always, a network of people to interact with where they can identify new opportunities and identify ways for those opportunities to reach to their fullest capacity. While you'll have people straight out of college or even dropouts from college who just know how to network, know what's going on with the scene, and can make the right connections and build a name for themselves that way, and thereby introduce this person to that other person. And after a handful of such introductions of this promising young talent somewhere in the world to this individual that might be looking for that talent, you do that 3 or 4 times, the individual that was looking for the talent might as well just hire you, or wouldn't be surprised if that person would hire you, or place you in a capacity where you can identify more of those opportunities because you've demonstrated your skill set, that you have an eye into a specific niche where you can identify opportunities that others might not have been able to identify.
Excellent, thank you. I have one question that came in from a student in the group, probably to get a little bit more understanding of skills and credentialing. What educational path does one need to enter into your field?
So I don't think there's any particular path that'll be tried and true. From my own perspective, I have seen firms that will actually hesitate to hire somebody with a PhD. There is that fear that if I come from a high and mighty position and I'm speaking with a startup that I think is, well, if I think the startup is not a good idea, that's what they're hiring me to identify. But even a worst case scenario, they're worried that I might be intimidated by the startup. And because I want to show that I have a PhD, I will try to show the founder why the founder is wrong for no particular reason other than to feed my own ego. So they had seen that more than once, and they actually were then hesitating to hire people with advanced degrees because they didn't want to scare any founder away that did not have those skills, and also didn't want to scare away a founder that did have those skills, but might be viewed as a threat to their partner who has a PhD. However, in many cases, having a PhD is extremely valuable in being able to understand and develop that rapport with the deep science companies that I'm typically working with. But I've seen so many investors that do not have that advanced degree, but have a deep enough knowledge of the industry and a deep enough Rolodex to know who to reach out to and who to contact to further grow that information. So the best founders that I've seen, while some of them, the best venture capital investors that I've seen, while some of them do have PhDs, while some of them have started companies, the really shining part about them is they will reach out to a variety of different people. They won't be shy to do that. And when you ask them a question, they'll know enough. They'll have read a book in the space or know enough about the space to act intelligently and think through the probability, but also be willing always to learn from the founders. So you have that deep discussion, you learn what the problems are, you have your sufficient knowledge to be able to ask the right questions, but then you use that information to say, okay, I have this huge network of people. How can I best help you accomplish your goals? So that would be in identifying the companies, and exactly the same skill sets would be in identifying potential places to work as a venture capital, developing those skills of building that network, meeting with people. One truism, which was a truism, I don't know if it still is, was that a venture capital firm will almost never advertise an opening for an associate or for an analyst. It's all based upon word of mouth, that if you don't find a way to have met me in some circumstance, obviously with COVID that might be changing, but if you don't have a way to be introduced to me, then you are not sufficiently good at networking to deserve this position, or you won't be productive in this position. So a lot of it is getting back to that meeting people and developing those strong networks to be most effective at identifying opportunities and nurturing those relationships.
Terrific. Thank you, boss. Appreciate it. Now, Many students might be interested once they finish their education, whether bachelor's or another degree thereafter. What are the what entry levels roles are most prevalent for me? So this next question is two parts. Which kind of entry level roles are most prevalent? And second, regarding hiring cycles that may impact those roles or other ones, what's the best time for a student to begin their first full-time job search?
Depends upon which field it is. I was off cycle for many of my job searches. And as long as you're patient and keep plugging away at it, opportunities will present themselves. For venture capital, I'm not aware of any firm and fast rules for hiring cycles. It will follow the funding cycle to some extent. So if a fund brings in new money, they will then be in a position to hire individuals to help deploy that capital. And if you track firms announcing new series of fundings, they appear to be almost every week. Somebody else is announcing a new set of fundings. So that implies that there really is no tried and true formula for a time of year. How to get that first position is how to network. What events can you identify through Eventbrite or any other forum to see, okay, what events are there where I have the potential to cross paths with these individuals? Is there somebody that perhaps received venture funding that I know who I can develop a relationship with and then ask them for a referral? Well, who gave you that money? And march from person to person, obviously utilizing the skill sets that you're being taught in college and graduate school as to how to conduct an interview, how to introduce yourself during that interview, how to follow up, and with the always invaluable, who else can you introduce me to? Who else can I speak to that might be of interest, to keep that chain going until you get as close to your goal as possible. I found that sometimes it requires a level of tenacity where the first time you meet somebody or the first time you introduce somebody, it might not stick. But keeping at it and being introduced again or crossing paths with that person on a number of occasions lends that legitimacy that now you're viewed as, oh, I've seen that individual before. Oh, now you're a friend because, yeah, we've never spoken to each other, but it's the third time seeing you, always at friendly events. You must be somebody that I should really know if I keep seeing.
Understood. Understood. So we have another great question from the group, and it's pretty related to what you're talking about regarding referrals and interactions and such. How are professionals in your field networking amidst our current circumstances with the pandemic and COVID-19?
Sure. I've found the different networking platforms invaluable. So a lot of networking now is done through LinkedIn, through several Slack groups that I'm on. In addition to that, volunteering at a variety of different universities is getting me access to larger networks. So there are, personally for myself, startup communities that require mentorship at in New York City, at Cornell, at Sloan Kettering, at Rockefeller, at NYU, and I'm involved in programs at those 4 universities. And through those 4 universities, I'll be introduced to a variety of individuals that I might or might not have come into contact otherwise. So it's finding that nucleus and that springboard, and then acting upon that springboard is one valuable way to do it. So finding perhaps a startup that you can lend some value to in whatever capacity it would be, and then when they go about fundraising or pitching to different venture communities, you'll say, okay, I'm an analyst to this, and start developing that relationship. And it's not going to be a straight path to the venture capital group, but people want to see, even in venture capital, want to see a diversity of experience that you'll be able to bring to the table. Having participated in a startup and seeing that side of the equation is definitely one route towards that goal.
Understood, sir. Thank you. We have a few questions from the chat over here, and I want to ask one more, then go back to the chat for the questions, if that's okay. Kind of shifting gears back to opportunities such as full-time, and now talking about internships. What kinds of internship experiences should students be seeking? And if remote or virtual, how might those students still benefit from that experience?
Mm-hmm. The It's definitely a hard call for how best to secure an internship nowadays, right? So many companies are going virtual. And when I was at iTorrent, as part of Thermo Fisher, I think we could have had up to 8 interns at any particular summer. And we could have expanded beyond that if it was just the capacity of the site. So there was a very robust internship program. But with everything being so secured nowadays in terms of, well, we only want the minimum number of people on site and we want to stagger work. I can't speak for how it's being done at Thermo Fisher, not having been there, the company for 3 years, but I can only imagine that the intern program may not be as robust this year as was the previous year. However, on the flip side, I dealt with a startup that said they had 13 interns this summer, which is a phenomenal number. They thought very carefully through how can they provide value to their interns and how could their interns provide value to them, with the understanding that so many people were looking for something to do over the summer, being cooped up and locked up in their house and not even being able to take that vacation they wanted to take. So I had to provide that opportunity. Unfortunately, I don't know how they sourced those interns, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was through standard forums. In this case, the value they provided to their interns was through education. It was an artificial intelligence associated software company. And they gave weekly artificial intelligence classes to their interns while having their interns essentially, many of them generate just data tables for the company. So not such interesting work, but crucial work for the success of the company. And the interns, not instead of being paid with cash, were paid with these classes to help them understand this data that you're collecting for us, how are we utilizing it to make a valuable product, and therefore a better understanding of how AI works in a practical sense for startups.
Understood. Thank you. We're very thankful for an extremely engaged group today. We have more and more questions coming in from the chat. Starting with the most recent, are there part-time positions in your field for someone who wants to work while in school?
They're hard, depends on what my field is defined as. Mm-hmm. The tri-university, Cornell, Rockefeller, Sloan Kettering has a course being given at, I'm not sure who's actually hosting that course, but in that course, there are 20 startups, and almost all of the startups have a team of 5 or 6 individuals who are working there part-time, either graduate students, medical doctors, somewhere in one of those universities that want to learn more about the potential for an idea and to explore what an idea looks like, and are given the time to learn hands-on how it's done in a part-time capacity, unpaid, right? This is part of a program. And I guess I would recommend people look at opportunities in the Yeshiva world as to what potential there is for a similar program or what programs are currently being run that would enable that. So that would be a great stepping stone, working at a university-based startup or a university-based startup exploratory program or a university-based investment exploratory program. All of these are great ways to network with people and to understand the process better. When I did a program in graduate school where I was partnered with, I think it was 4 students, an industry mentor, and a recently filed patent at MIT, I found part of the process of exploring how would you theoretically commercialize this patent was really interesting in and of itself. But the part that really was eye-opening was my ability to call up almost anybody and say, hey, I'm a graduate student. I have this interesting idea. Can you help me understand its fit into today's marketplace and what steps I should theoretically take to commercialize this product? I can only imagine if I was actually a founder, the bar would have been that much higher. But as a student, many people are very gracious with their time and want to give back in some capacity and take full advantage of that while still in school. And you don't be surprised by how many different phone calls, how many different phones will be picked up if you reach out through YU's mentoring programs or through LinkedIn or through any other forum or avenue or whatever the latest software would be. Reaching out to people as a student eager to learn will often be met with a smile and a warm response on the other side.
Understood. Thank you. So taking it to another question that was asked by a student in the chat, what's your suggestion for someone with a background in science, but a lack of experience in VC? What do you do to get that first job without the previous experience?
Offering your services as an analyst to help analyze specific deals, building somewhat of a name for yourself by posting on LinkedIn, if that's your penchant. I've seen people post on LinkedIn again and again, analysis of a specific sector or deep knowledge of here are the 24 best companies in the space, and continue to update that. And with enough time, somebody will pick up on it and say, hey, this is a pretty good list, send it to their friend, and then you'll reach out to the person. You can use any forum as the ability to add value to a community and receive recognition for that value, whether it be LinkedIn, whether it be Medium, whether it be Twitter. These are all places where I've seen successful use of an opinion, of analysis being just released into the world, and with the hope that it finds a place to stick and garners for you a reputation of somebody who knows how to think critically and somebody who understands the way in this case, the startup or VC world works, and perhaps land a position with that. Whether the position is in VC or the position is elsewhere, if you become passionate about what you're doing and the person hiring you is passionate about it, sees value there, I think you'll be happy in whatever capacity that such a pursuit lands you.
Understood. Thank you. So we'll get back to a couple of our scheduled questions and then return to the chat for more. Again, very thankful that we have an extremely engaged group today. So your education credentials include a PhD in genetics. Can you tell us about what went into the decision to pursue further study a little bit more deeply, excuse me, and how has it impacted your career, maybe in ways that you haven't yet mentioned?
Sure. I always had a fascination with the hard sciences, always eager to explore the world around me. The undergraduate, so that comes from my family. Both my father and my uncle are medical doctors. They both had a really strong affinity with research and the research sciences, although for a variety of reasons, they pivoted and found great satisfaction over both of their long careers in treating patients and helping in that capacity. But that was bred into me from a young age, appreciation of exploration and learning more about the world around me. This was further built while a high school student at Yeshiva University High School for Boys at MCA. I had a really close friend whose father was a research professor at Harvard University. So I went at the age of 14 to go explore those hallways and was really fascinated by what I saw and what can be done. And then while at Yeshiva University, I had access to a phenomenal biology team. Took very early on in my studies a course through Moshe David Tendler. Thoroughly enjoyed his perspective of decades of involvement in the highest level of science, and was able to do 3 internships between the summers at Yeshiva University, 2 at Columbia Medical School and 1 at Mount Sinai School of Medicine. And with that, gained even further exposure to what research looks like. And while at Columbia Medical School, was active was doing an internship in the neuroscience department, neurogenetics department, and actively diagnosing disease, or at least running the assays that would then be turned over to the medical doctors who would diagnose the disease. But seeing how you have patients that for decades didn't have a proper understanding of their disorder, and because of research being done in a laboratory, now had an insight into how what is different about them, and then hopefully will lead to a better understanding of and a better treatment. So with that 3 years of research and the biology undergraduate, I explored different graduate school programs. And while at Harvard, the biggest changes was coming from an insular Yeshiva undergraduate career, where the student population is pretty uniform. So that was a big change, to really be exposed to a more diverse set of people from a more diverse set of locations and backgrounds. And just working on science, going through that, there was no hazing, but going through that really rigorous training to get everybody who perhaps wasn't exposed to the rigor of hard science up to that level within a year or two, to really be able to understand how to use all of the tools to ask the most rigorous questions and figure out how to ask a question that can be answered, and how to approach an experiment that will answer that question, and to go in that stepwise fashion. So training in that for several years over long multi-year projects is really an excellent skill to have when then pivoting towards, okay, how do I build a business? So I like to think about different types of problems that one can solve. While in graduate school, you would typically ask a 4-year-long question, maybe broken down into 6-month stints. Moving to Thermo Fisher Scientific, my experience in launching products was the timeline for a new product launch was on the order of 6 months to 12 months for a new product. But obviously, more complex takes longer, but your typical one was more in the time span of a year to launch a new product. Moving to venture capital community, every firm, again, is different there, but a decision can be made in a week to 2 months. And then moving on to public equity analysis at a large hedge fund, we're talking sometimes about making a decision in 3 days for an IPO versus making a decision in a couple of hours for a follow-on fundraising round. So obviously you have to have a lot of prior knowledge, but then you have to be able to incorporate and assimilate all of the new information provided so that a new decision can be made in 45 minutes. So how to learn how to act on scant information, but still not be, on one hand, not to be paralyzed by too much information, but also not to be paralyzed by too little information, is a skill that takes a lifetime to develop, how to make those decisions in a timely fashion and know what risks are worth taking and what risks have to be taken.
Understood. Thank you. So shifting gears just a little bit to talk a bit more about networking and introduce the idea of mentorship. Can you give an example of where networking and mentorship played an integral role in your career?
Absolutely. My professor at graduate school is still a strong advocate of all of his students. I've gone back to him on a number of different occasions for introductions, for advice, and for the ability or specific tasks that he was able to give me the ability to move forward myself. And his response always was, for a student, either his current student or his past students, those remain his highest priority, because at heart, he's a professor and his job is to support his students. It's not just professors, it's also other people that I've worked with. The founder of Internships Systems has always been gracious with his time. The difference between knowing to decide when one is overstaying their welcome, obviously is an important factor, to be judicious with the questions that are being asked. But overall, I've had a really pleasant experience dealing with people who've been gracious with their time, gracious with the referrals, and overall helpful with mentoring me. And I think one never outgrows mentoring. I'm still looking towards people for mentorship, and I expect to be looking towards people for mentorship for the rest of my career and throughout my life. There's always somebody that can provide that new angle. That person may not even be older than you are, right? With new, if you need not to be mentored in a specific skill set, often it's important to go to somebody younger who perhaps has a greater exposure or a different perspective, and have them mentor you in a specific capacity. So I was disappointed over the summer when I referred a company to a mentorship program And the person's response was, I'm in my 60s. This is my fourth company. I'm not going to listen to some 30-year-olds. And I was disappointed by that because I could have been an invaluable experience for this individual.
Mhm.
And it might have been an uncomfortable experience, but I think it would have been positive at the
Understood, sir. Thank you very much. So we have one more question, and I'm going to integrate a question from the chat into this one. So making it a bit like two parts. So where do you see the field headed in the next 5 years, and how will you adjust to those developments? But more importantly, do you think the healthcare field, either in the short term or long term, will be expanding with so much attention being brought to it with the pandemic and COVID-19?
So one at a time.
Sure.
The community, so many events are going virtual now, and I think that will stay. And many of these in-person events will have a virtual component, and that we will get better and better at allowing spontaneous interactions to occur during a virtual session. I've been attended a couple of online conferences, and some platforms are better than other platforms, but they do have some manner of chatting with somebody that catches your attention, or even beforehand, the little bit of work, scheduling those appointments. And 15 minutes is enough to really just get a feel for somebody, and it would be the equivalent of exchanging business cards in an in-person fashion, just here done virtually, and then exchanging emails afterwards. I think that will continue, and you'll have blended programs with both an in-person quality to them and a virtual quality to them. And everybody can have their choice as to how best to attend. Whether the relationships will be stronger in one capacity or the other remains to be seen. I'm looking forward in the biotech field, the largest conference for the parts that I'm interested in is the JP Morgan conference every year in January. So it was just before COVID last year. I haven't been tracking personally what is going to happen this year. Clearly, I can't imagine it being in person with 30,000 people descending upon San Francisco. But I don't know what elements of it will be virtual and how it will be run, but I'm curious to start looking into that when we get closer to that date.
Mm-hmm.
The growth of biotech has been extraordinary this year. Huge amount of attention being paid to the vaccines being developed, about 50 different vaccines in active late-stage development by now. Hopefully the first ones coming out within the next 5 to 6 weeks. In addition, that has created a greater interest in biotech overall. Just because right now people are struggling with COVID doesn't mean that people are not also struggling with cancer, with Alzheimer's, with Parkinson's disease, and a variety of other concerns that we have as the global population ages and as healthcare gets hand in hand with that more expensive. As CRISPR enables us to precisely do genetic editing to cure diseases, all of these aspects have led to an increase in attention being paid to the biotech industry. I just saw a report, I think this morning, that are predicting 70 to 80 biotech IPOs this year. And it's really been going on at an insane pace. Mm-hmm. With all of these companies now having solid funding, hopefully they will all do something positive with the funding, or at least enough of them do something positive with the funding for that cycle to continue in a righteous fashion. It would be an absolute shame if there were too many, if people paid attention to too many failures, because that's part of the science. There will be success stories, there will be failures, but I would hope that people would pay attention to the success stories, and that cycle will continue with even more opportunities being created. And a scientific firm really is just any other large company. You need all of the diversity of skill sets that any background can provide. So it behooves us not to think of big pharma as a place where only bio majors should bother to apply. They really need the full diversity of human experience to develop the products to develop market, sell, and support the people taking the products that will change the way medicine is done in this country.
Understood. That wraps my initial questions. I have one more question, two more questions actually to get in for the chat. And I ask that anybody who is with us, they can ask any questions in the chat for the next few moments as well. And I'll do my very best to get them. One question will kind of inform how you come across your information and industry expertise in news, so to speak. So how do you keep track of which companies are receiving funding? And more so, what are your go-to sources and resources for industry news and field news?
There's so many different news sources out there. And the issue is that not where you get your news, but how you filter out the news and find the stuff that's most pertinent to you. Google Feed is actually pretty reasonable at identifying where your interests lie and continuing to support that. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a vicious cycle where if you read an article that gets you aggravated, it gives you more articles that get you aggravated, or vice versa, and it continues to build an unhealthy mindset. But a lot of my news comes from a variety of different newsletters, email newsletters that are typically, some aspect of them are free, whether it only gives you the headlines for free or it gives you some segment of them for free, and some of them are entirely free. Watching the LinkedIn feed, there obviously is some filters needed there as more and more cat videos creep onto LinkedIn that don't belong there. And then just the forum of friends that I have, they're not sending necessarily emails, but colleagues, when you have a Slack channel, you'll have people will chime in with the most pertinent and important news going there. There are also a number of investment tracking websites, and you can set up informational feeds based upon those, based upon your interests. I want to look at all new fundings, less than $5 million in New York City in this industry. And that will then generate a feed which can be refreshed or automatically generated. And that ends up also being a valuable way to track what's going on in the community.
Understood. We had one more in here. Just want to see if there's any others. Regarding your consulting, and a question was asked of how do you figure out how to inform your structure for fees with the companies that you do consult for? And you can use your discretion on what informs that. You don't have to give particular examples at all. But as far as what has informed your expertise and what you would charge for your lens, so to speak, how is it that you go about into that market research?
Sure. That is hard to discuss in a public forum that's going online. But it's a blend of startups are equity rich and capital poor generally when they're first starting out. So that's something, a factor to take into account, that they might not be taking salaries for themselves for the key employees, or only some employees are taking salaries. So there, I couldn't live with myself for taking a salary for some of those companies. But that you'll have a fund that has hundreds of millions of dollars, and if you charge them what you thought your going rate was, that would be foolish, because for them, they won't even respect your opinion if you charge too little. So that even if you don't necessarily deserve it, it's creating the brand around yourself that if they think your opinion is worth X, then they will treat it as a valuable opinion. If they think it's worth much less, they won't even treat it as a valuable opinion. So there is that a number of factors have to go in to deciding upon a consulting price, whether it be, again, cash or equity, and where that goes, whether you're being paid per project, being paid per hour, whether you're being paid then, whether that hours divided up into minutes or divided up to quarter hours or half hours, is there travel time involved? So really a whole bunch of different factors will go into making that decision. And there are plenty of websites out there that will help you integrate all of these and use for yourself to figure out how to set prices.
Understood. So if you were to leave the group with one lasting thought or insight, considering our conversation, what would that thought or insight be?
continue to explore, revisit where you think you are, right? Try to take an objective look at what you are doing, what makes you happy, and what your needs are. And with that, don't ever feel like you're stuck in a rut. I think the United States has always been a place where one can constantly reinvent themselves. And particularly at this junction in time with COVID going on, people are even reinventing themselves even more quickly and taking time to step back and say, okay, what am I really passionate about? And how can I do something about it? Never being shy when exploring that opportunity, either shy by not asking yourselves the questions that are really important to you, but also not to be shy by asking other people those questions that are important to you. My wife is a mental health counselor, so she is constantly reminding all of her peers and our entire family the importance of checking on your own mental health, especially in these trying times, to make sure that you're in a stable place and don't feel that just because somebody else during lockdown of COVID learned both Swahili and Spanish, and I just played a bunch of Fortnite, don't let that get to you either, because everybody reacts to stresses in different ways, but make sure to check in that you're in a healthy position. And by being in a healthy mental position, you're able to really explore what your needs are. And again, explore that without being shy to ask yourselves the questions, but without being shy to ask other people those questions.
Understood. Dr. Rosenbaum, it's been an absolute pleasure having a conversation with you today. For everybody who joined us, I hope that you have enjoyed the conversation as well. I would like to finish with a couple of housekeeping and remarks. Number one is we want to know how you enjoyed this experience. I'd love to continue to develop these events for you all, share possible feedback if it's relevant to how the conversation went and to inform the future. So I put into the chat a quick survey for you all to take right now, to take about 2 minutes to fill out. We would love your feedback. That's number one. Number two is a bit of a follow-up for Dr. Rosenbaum. How, if students were interested in networking with you and taking the conversation a little further, how might they be able to reach you?
Sure, please feel free to reach out either through Yeshiva University's mentoring portal. I forget what the name is there, but you can find me on that portal, as well as directly through LinkedIn. Avi Rosenbaum, you should be able to find Avi Abraham Rosenbaum. You should be able to find my name there as well.
Terrific, terrific. If you did come here because you got my ads through email, his LinkedIn is listed on the advertisement, so that if you'd like to do a little bit research and check out his background and determine some outreach, you can consult with the Career Center for making sure that outreach is professional and pointed at this gentleman's expertise. We're happy to support you. But thank you very much, Dr. Rosenbaum, for making the time again. I very much enjoyed the conversation. Everyone, thank you for joining. You can find this uploaded on YouTube in the next couple of days. Dr. Rosenbaum, an absolute pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure. Great to see everybody. Thank you for coming. And thank you very much, Matt. Thank you very much, Rebecca Coleman, and everybody else in the chat. This was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
You're welcome.
Be well, everyone. Take care.
Talk to you soon. Bye.